Let's start. Good evening, everyone, and a very warm welcome to our distinguished speakers, colleagues, researchers, and postgraduate students. It is my great pleasure, on behalf of the Faculty of Business and Communication at An-Najah National University, to welcome you to today's workshop, Meet the Editors, organized in collaboration with Cardiff Business School at Cardiff University. Today's session is especially important because publishing in a reputable academic journal is not only about having good research ideas, it is also about understanding the expectation of editors, the standards of contribution, the logic of peer review, and how to position our work for real academic impact. We are truly honored to host three distinguished scholars and journal editors, Professor Caroline Strong, Professor Luigi M. Duluca, and Dr. Wujdan Umran. Their experience and insights will provide our faculty members, researchers, and postgraduate students with valuable guidance on how to improve the quality, relevancy, and publishability of their research. At the Faculty of Business and Communication, we strongly believe that international academic collaboration is essential for strengthening research culture, supporting young scholars, and connecting our university with global academic communities. I would like sincerely to thank our colleagues at Cardiff Business School, especially Dr. Joshi, for his valuable contribution toward making this event happening. And also, I would like to thank Ms. Shada for her effort also. And I extend my appreciation to all participants for joining us today. We look forward to an engaging, practical, and inspiring discussion. Thank you and welcome again to this important workshop. Dr. Joshi, the floor is yours now.
Oh, thank you, Rafa. That was such a very warm welcome, and thank you so much. It really is our pleasure. It really is our pleasure, and I'm so pleased that this collaborative partnership is beginning to start to take fruit. We hope that this will be the first of many. We hope that this will be the first of many things that we are able to contribute to
Thank you.
to to our collaboration. I mean, we have as much to learn from you as to impart, and so we understand and appreciate the whole endeavor we are doing here. I mean, I'm very mindful, especially when I had discussions with my colleagues recently about what this the objective of this session is. I mean, clearly it is about for you guys to understand what it is to publish in in top international journals. But really, it's more than that. We know that uh, academics thrive and live through international collaboration and international forums, workshops and conferences and so on. And without those kind of forums, we struggle. And we understand that it's not always easy for academics from different parts of the world, and certainly from Palestine, to be able to participate in international conferences where they get an opportunity to present what the unique experiences that you have in Palestine. So this will be some way of a substitute, not really a perfect substitute, but a way for your colleagues to get an opportunity to talk to and to listen to three top international academics, especially in top journals. I mean, I before I kick off or my colleagues start, I really have to thank them. They were very eager and very excited to be part of this project. And a special thank you to Vojan because she's one of our students, and we are very proud of what she's achieved, and we hope that she'll be able to share her own personal experience of being an academic from Palestine and of Palestinian heritage, and that I hope will be a source of inspiration for your colleagues. And we've, as you are aware, we've agreed to cover particular topics. First of all, my colleagues will introduce their journals and how to talk. We talk about high impact research, and as you rightly point out, Rafat, it's not just about having to do the research; it's about how to get it into top journals. And part of the whole process, I think I first published my paper in the late 90s. So, it's almost 30 years ago. And the painful process of it is to how you deal with rejections more than acceptance. But when you get a paper accepted or you get a revise and resubmit, you're always overjoyed. But how you deal with acceptance. In fact, this was one of the driving force for why I had a lot of co-authors, because it's better to share rejections than to suffer through by yourself. So anyway, you're not here to hear me carrying on. You're here to listen to my colleagues. So let's start off. First of all, I like to invite Professor Luigi De Luca, a professor of marketing and strategy at the Cardiff Business School, and a very accomplished and well-established academic. And Luigi will talk about, first of all, his own journal and his own experience in how you publish in top journals, which he is part of in this journal. Thank you. And over to you, Luigi.
Thank you very much, Joshi, and thanks again, colleagues, for the invitation. So, as Joshi anticipated, I will introduce the journal I collaborate with and reflect on some of the main factors which, from experience, I've observed contributing to publication success and doing good research. But first of all, as Joshi said, my name is Luigi De Luca. I'm a professor of marketing and innovation at Cardiff Business School. I am Italian from birth, but live and work in the UK since 2007, so about 20 years now. And I have my PhD from Bocconi University back in Milan, in Italy. So I'm going to share my slides now. There we go. Joshi, can you confirm you can see the slides?
Yes, absolutely.
Perfect.
So,
okay. So, and do you see your image as well, or just the slides? You don't see the...
Yeah, no, I see the slides, and it's all in presentation mode at the moment.
Fantastic. So, first of all, let me introduce the Journal of Product Innovation Management, of which I am one of the 4 co-editors in chief, together with Gerda Gemser from University of Melbourne, Australia, Minu Kumar from San Francisco State, and Ruby Lee from Florida State. So as you can see, we're a very diverse team with people representing different continents, different nations, different research interests and expertise. And we cover 3 continents, so we have a fairly good geographical representation. And we've been working as co-editors in chief since the 1st of January 2025. So we're a year and a half, just about a year and a half into our tenure. So the journal is owned by the Product Development and Management Association, the PDMA. It was founded in 1984, so we're over 40 years old. And initially, the journal focused strictly on new product development and new service development as the core topic. But over time, it evolved and grew its scope to now embrace technology, strategy, organizational issues, entrepreneurship, and the more contemporary topics of open innovation, design thinking, innovation for the grand challenges, so innovation that address societal challenges and business model innovation, and of course AI, which is everywhere today in the conversation. We are interdisciplinary or cross-disciplinary because innovation builds on many different disciplinary traditions: marketing, strategy, design, management, technology, and more. So we'll cover this topic later on about interdisciplinarity. We publish 6 issues a year and cover a wide variety of methods and theories. So to start introducing a little bit of the discussion about rankings, this is the position of our journal in the major international rankings. So we are rated as 4-star by the Association of Business School, or the ABS list, or AJG list. In the UK, we are rated as A-star, which is the top category from the ABDC ranking list in Australia, and we are Q1 of the Semago journal ranking. So we're fairly well positioned in terms of rankings. We have an impact factor of 8, which means that the average article is cited, 8 times in the first 2 years from publication, and we have an acceptance rate of about 5%. So over 100 submissions we receive, we publish on average 5 articles. Very briefly, we have beyond the journal, we have a lot of outreach activity in the community, which is also part of what I'd like to talk today, because I think research and publishing is beyond just the mere process of submitting papers to journal, but entails how you socialize within the community of research you want to belong to, either online or offline. There are multiple ways now to be engaged, and that's a very important component of the game. So we have an annual conference every year. We have doctoral consortium meetings every 2 years. This year is one of them, hosted by North Carolina State University. We do have a reviewer development program to train new scholars to become better reviewers for the journal and then progress through our editorial board. And we've already hosted more than 50 people through this program, and 6 of them, very early career researchers, are now part of our ERB. And we also do paper development workshops. We want to be very active in this space. And what are these paper development workshops? They're basically one-day meetings, usually, where as editors, and sometimes together with associate editors or editorial review board members, we meet with a group of researchers who have some work in progress. They present this work to us. We give feedback. They meet other fellow researchers, and maybe they start collaborations. And all this is free of charge, just based on capacity. We invite as many as we can. And many journals of all sorts everywhere in the world now organize many of these workshops, either online or offline, and they're very useful. My recommendation is to look out for these and try to attend those relevant to you. Now, my first topic, the main question of my talk is what makes a top-tier publication? So what it takes to get published in a top-tier journal. And let me start by saying that this has always been a difficult thing to achieve. As Joshi said, it takes time, it takes many failures, takes many attempts, takes a lot of learning, and it's becoming more competitive and more difficult because of the volume of researchers submitting work, but also the productivity of all these researchers, because with AI and technology, digital technology in general, the speed of production is increasing. So journals receive more and more papers, and therefore, by definition, the game becomes more and more selective and competitive. So to answer the question, what does it take to make a top-tier publication? Let's first ask the question, what is a top-tier journal? So how do we define this? And very simply, a top-tier journal is defined by one or more journal rankings. So there are lists, there are classifications that sort of say, this is a top journal, this is not a top journal. So what are these lists? There are many of them. I mentioned two before, or three: the Academic Journal Guide, AJG in the UK, the Australian one, I mentioned the Semago, but there are many. And there are essentially of two types. There are inclusive lists, I would call them. So these are very long lists with so many journals. For example, 1,800 for the AGJ, more than 2,600 for the ABDC in Australia. So these encompass a lot of journals, and they rank all these journals on a scale from 1 to 4 or from C to A in terms of quality. So the approach of this list is to be very inclusive and to just differentiate among journals based on quality rankings. And then there's a different type, which I would call exclusive lists, that are like VIP clubs or members-only clubs. So they're very short, the Financial Times 50, the FT 50, or the UTD 24, which, as you can see from these numbers, include very, very small sets of journal, and they're very elite, okay? And they don't differentiate in terms of quality among the journals. They are either including or excluding, and most of the journals, as you can imagine, are excluded from this. So if you want a useful overview, the Harzik Journal Quality List, which you can find on a website and freely download, is like a database with every possible list of journal rankings in the world. And you will find national lists from France, Germany, or Spain, or Brazil, including school lists, so individual universities publishing their stuff. So that's an example of the ABS list, or AJG in the UK. For the category of innovation, they have, on the top, you can see different indicators they used to build the rank. And then you can see all the journals ranked by quality. So the top one is Research Policy, which is a 4-star. It's the Distinction Journal. The second one is Our Journal, which is a 4. And then you've got 3-star, 2-star, and then you go down the line. So if you are researching innovation, you can access the list and figure out what are the key journals ranked by quality in the international community. And that's already an indication of where it's worth targeting your work depending on the quality you want to aim for. This list has 22 areas, so you can see probably you will find your own topic, your own interest listed here. We go from accounting to economics to organization studies and the likes. And at the bottom, you can see roughly what is the distribution in terms of quality. So out of 1,822 journals listed overall in the latest version, only 145, which is about 7%, are 4-star quality, 323 are 3-star, and you can see that the main bulk of the journals are either 1 or 2. So the distribution is skewed towards the lower quality ranked journal. Top journals or highly ranked or top tier are fewer. Now, the next thing I want to talk about quickly is what is a top tier research, which is a different question from what is a top tier journal. So top tier research is an original and significant contribution to knowledge backed or supported by rigorous methods. So in a simple definition, which is not so simple to implement, this is what makes a top tier research project. And research quality is not the same thing as top tier publication. So you can see it over here. So research quality is a necessary condition to get into a top tier journal. So if you want to get into top tier journal, your concern should be, how do I do research quality or high quality research. You can forget about the list for a second and focus on the activity that supports the process. But it's not true the other way around. So not all good research necessarily appears on top tier journals. There are so many other ways of publishing and communicating research. So we shouldn't be so narrowly focused on top tier journals when it comes to understanding or locating good research. You can do excellent research and publish it in a blog or in a regional journal or in a teaching case study. There are different formats. What changes, of course, is the incentives that you have to reach the top tier journal, to get recruited, to get promoted, to get acknowledged and rewarded. So in our journal, we answer the question, what is high quality research, with these 5 criteria that you can find in our recent editorial. First of all, the research must fit with the journal. So it has to be in line with what the journal is interested in. And this criterion is true for every journal. So if you want to target a top tier journal, first of all, make sure you understand the debate within the journal, what they're interested in, what the community of people gathering around the journal discusses. Because if you submit a great piece of work about a topic they're not interested in, you will get a desk rejection because the editor will say, it's not for us, it's not our type of work. If you want to join a conversation, make sure you talk about the things other people are already talking about. Then you have to have a novel and relevant research question. So that is another necessary condition. Good research always have a research question. Good research always brings some new problem that people haven't thought about or haven't solved before. If your research confirms or restates things that we already know, it's very unlikely to be interesting for the top tier journals. Maybe it will make it into a lower tier journal, but it's more difficult to get to a top one. Then ecological value. What does this mean? It has nothing to do with green or environment. Ecological value means that your research should make sense for the real world. To what extent you're addressing problems that are felt outside academia, outside the research, by people, companies, organizations in the community. Good execution is fundamental. So you need to match the standards in terms of methods, in terms of theoretical rigor, in terms of presentation of research. And the best way to achieve that is simply to read and make sure you're familiar with the type of quality that similar articles on similar topics show in those journals. So understanding and knowing the journals well, it's key to set your own bar at the right level. If, for example, if you publish a piece of qualitative work based on interviews and your sample is of 5 interviewees or 10, but the average sample in that journal is 25 or 30, you should already be able to understand that your execution is not up to their standards. And finally, ethical standards. So does your research show appropriate consideration of ethical procedures? Is it conducted ethically with respect to participants, but also with respect to the references and the use of artificial intelligence in the writing process, and all the ethical criteria that are always published on the journal's website. Another interesting research, and then about to close, is this article in the Academy of Management journal, which is free to read and download, that breaks down the challenge of developing a top-tier publication into a puzzle. Puzzle made of different elements, some related to theory, some related to methods, some related to the literature. But the most important element in the middle is the puzzle, is the problem you focus upon, the idea that seeds the whole project. And that's the core element where you always have to start to build a strong project. Even a very well executed project that builds on an idea that has little interest is not going to make it into a top journal. Finally, research quality is not enough. And as we'll hear from the next speaker, you also have to be able and willing to navigate the review process. Willing, because this takes time. As Joshi said, is very painful, is boring at times, is fraught with dissatisfaction and bad news at times. So you have to have that strength and willingness to go through it. And ability, as we are talking about today, is also an important element. So you need to have the skills, the experience, and the practice to successfully navigate the review process. This means that some projects of very high quality, unfortunately, don't make it into the top tier publication because they fall at some point during the process. They may get into another journal, but sometimes the author has spent years and a lot of efforts and sacrifices to then end up with a rejection. So a few tips to learn from experience and build go up the learning curve, so to speak. First of all, be ambitious. If your work meets the criteria for high quality research, if that's your best work, you should aim high and try to hit, the good journals in your discipline. Even if you get rejected, you can learn from the feedback and try again with different journals, improve your work. As you continue, you may then lower the target. As we saw in the ABS list, you can start from a 4-star and maybe end up to a 3 or a 2-star along the way, which is not a problem. Always be responsible, though, and mindful that every time you submit your work, you create work for other people, reviewers and editors. So always make sure that what you submit is really worth the process and is not just trying your luck or trying your chances, because that's not going to build a good reputation for you. And finally, if you can, try to gain experience as a reviewer, for a conference, for a journal, for a workshop, so that you see the process from the other side. So how does that feel to give feedback and review the work of others? And this was the last one from me. I'll stop sharing my screen. And thank you very much for your attention.
Oh, thank you very much, Luigi. I should have mentioned to everyone what we're the format we're gonna follow is let the presenters present, and then after that we will open up for Q&A and for discussion. So my apologies, but we look forward to inviting Luigi back again. But now let's hear from Professor Strong, Carolyn Strong, who's also a colleague of mine at CARBS and part of the same section as Luigi. And Carolyn will certainly will be able to introduce herself and talk a little bit about the difficult process of desk rejections. Thank you.
So,
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. It's nice to meet you online. So, as has been said, I'm Carolyn Strong. I'm a professor of marketing and strategy at Cardiff Business School, and I actually got my PhD at Cardiff Business School as well. So I've been engaged with Cardiff for a very long time. I'm the editor-in-chief of the Journal of Strategic Marketing, currently the editor-in-chief of the Journal of Strategic Marketing. We have grown so rapidly in the last number of years that the publishers actually recently, not yet announced, appointed a co-editor-in-chief because the workload is totally unmanageable for one person, which is really great because it is indicating how rapidly we are growing. So just a little brief history. The journal was established by two professors of marketing in 1993, one based at Cardiff and one based at Warwick, as it happens. Basically, what they identified was that there was an increase in emphasis on strategy rather than purely functional elements of marketing like communications and advertising. So in recognizing this, they set up and established the Journal of Strategic Marketing, which really aims to bring academic research and managerial relevance together around particular topics such as competitive strategy, marketing positioning, branding. You can see the list there. It's actually quite broad, but what it always is back to marketing. going to talk about desk rejects in a second, but a lot of the desk rejections are because they are not related to marketing, or particularly people see this is our journal as a very generic journal, and we do get, I like Luigi's term, authors trying their luck because they perceive us to be quite generic. And also authors try their luck, and I'll be really honest about this, we're a lower tier journal. We are quite often a second choice. So maybe a higher tier journal would reject a paper with amazing reviews, amazing feedback to improve the work, and then it might come to us. And so we do see that quite often. Not all of the time. We do have people who target us. My experience is authors tend to target us with their second best piece of work. So they might have a research project where the whole way through they are targeting a top tier journal. But in conversations with co-authors, they might find that, well, we have a second paper here that isn't as strong. We know it's not as strong. Which lower tier journal can we actually target it at? And it depends on the strength of your research, as Luigi said, how you target us. What I would say to anybody who is sending a paper rejected from a higher tier journal to a lower tier journal, it's an absolute must that you change the name of the editor in the letter, that you change the name of the publication in the letter. I will admit, on a bad day, sent a paper, a manuscript back to an author and said, I'm sorry, did you want to send this to the Journal of Consumer Behaviour, or did you want to send it to the Journal of Student Marketing? It's a basic error, isn't it? But just, as Luigi said, pay attention to the detail, really. So could I have the next slide, please, Luigi? Thank you. So emerging trends in strategic marketing is exactly just what it is in our teaching, isn't it? In our academic life, obviously a growth in AI and technology. There's a real growth in the ethical implications of technology and transformation. I personally have pushed for a growth in sustainability. My area is social marketing. We have quite a number of special issues commissioned around, for example, luxury fashion. We had a special issue around luxury fashion about 3 years ago, and we've got another special issue on sustainable luxury fashion, coming online in the next few weeks. And just on that note of special issues, for those of you who are looking, as Luigi just mentioned about be a reviewer, put yourself forward. Well, maybe form a team to make a special issue proposal. So most journals accept special issue proposals. What we're moving towards, we've got a lot of changes happening with the Journal of Strategic Marketing in July this year. And one of them is that we'll have 2 points in the year where we will consider special issue proposals. So you really should consider, have you got a team together in a particular area? And I'm not just talking about marketing, I'm talking about any area, because journals are continually looking to expand their readership, to expand their reviewer base, and that is one way of doing that. So, for example, with the forthcoming sustainable luxury branding special issue, that proposal was made by someone who's published in the Journal of Strategic Marketing, who is going to partner with a very well-known professor in Australia, and I'm going to be part of that team to oversee, because they've never done a special issue before. What that offers us is broadening the readership, broadening the authorship, and really getting us into we're quite popular in Australia, but our submissions from Australia is falling, and this is one way we can move forward. So just think about what you could offer a journal in terms of opening up a new market, which I think is quite important. So could I have the next slide, please, Luigi? Thank you. So I'm sure most of you know, but just to confirm, the submission process is you submit the article, which has hopefully followed the instructions for authors. This goes to the peer review administration team, who check it out for ethical reasons. They check it out for the use of AI, plagiarism, and also word count. If a submission doesn't conform to all of their checklists, it's automatically sent back to the author. If it's not rejected, it's an administrative resubmission requirement and it's sent back to the author, that could delay you quite a long time. So just make sure that you've read the instructions for authors and that you have followed that through. For example, word count is a big reason that, and these papers haven't even got to the editor. These papers are purely being handled by a remote administrator, and we don't see the paper until the administrators ticked all the boxes and then sent it on to us. So what will happen then with the Journal of Strategic Marketing is the manuscript comes to me. I then review the manuscript and decide whether it should be desk rejected or sent to an associate editor. So we have a bank of associate editors. I will send a manuscript to a handling associate editor who will then send it out to review. Now, sometimes the associate editor would desk reject a paper. I might have missed something, or they might, they will provide a review, but it won't be a peer review because they can see the name and everything on the paper. So I just wanted to give you a summary of our submission rate. As you can see from this slide, in 2025, we had 493 submissions. I personally handled every single one of those submissions, which is why you can see the need for a co-editor and the increasing the need for increasing numbers of associate editors. We appointed 14 new associate editors last summer because we just cannot handle the volume of submissions. So just from the numbers on the slide, we accepted to publication 49 of those, 110 were peer reviewed, and 2 peer reviewers, the associate editor and me, rejected the paper. So it's not an easy decision. So just say, for example, one review says accept and one review says reject. The associate editor will then make a call and review and make a recommendation. And the recommendation would be to me, Carolyn, I think we should give this one a second chance. I think we should allow it through, even though one's reject. And we have a conversation. They make the recommendation, and then in agreement, I then go on to accept the paper or major revision, whatever it happens to be. So the thing that everybody wants to know is desk reject. 334 papers were desk. I was quite shocked when I put this slide together over the weekend at the number of desk rejections that we have. And you can see from the slide that that's quite high already. In between January and March 2026, we've had 145 submissions and 94 of them were desk rejected. And that means desk rejected by the editor. And I feel really horrible and really cruel because that's me. So it's not an easy decision to make. Sometimes, sorry, I'll rephrase that. Sometimes it's not an easy decision to make. Sometimes it takes me 10 minutes because it's glaring errors in the paper. There's real issues why a paper should be desk rejected. So I think that's kind of the overview of Journal of Strategic Marketing. If any of you want to get involved, as I said, we're making quite a lot of changes in July with the new co-editor. We're going to be recruiting more associate editors if any of you are interested in those roles. And obviously, as Luigi said, becoming a reviewer is really important. It is time consuming, but reviewers are very, very difficult to secure. And one thing that I quite often say to an author who I ask to review is, well, you want someone to review your work. It's part of our academic community, isn't it? It's just something that we give our time to as academics. So I was asked then to talk about desk rejections and how to respond to reviewers' comments. So I've just put this short list together of why I would desk reject a paper. So normally I go into the Journal of Strategic Marketing portal on a Monday, and I will go through all of the submissions. Generally speaking, every Monday I have between 40 to 60 new submissions. They could be resubmissions, which are much easier to handle because I will simply forward it on to the existing associate editor. Now, the reason I might, not just me, any editor might desk reject a paper, is a weak strategic fit for the journal. This is the biggest one. This is, as again, using Luigi's words, trying your luck. This is where someone's got quite a generic paper. They can't decide where to submit it to. For example, I have quite a lot of papers on very small niche topic areas, like food markets in Vietnam. You know, very, very generic. And I would think that they should be going to more food type journals, more focused journals than the broader Journal of Strategic Marketing. So if I perceive something to have a weak fit, I will probably know that from the abstract. If it's questionable, I obviously would go delve further into the paper. But generally speaking, you could tell the scope of the submission is not within the Journal of Strategic Marketing quite quickly. Then we have limited or unclear contribution. And this is where we have a paper that, for example, builds on work published in a top tier journal that they think they're adapting or contributing to. And this is what I would refer to as an incremental extension. They're, for example, saying, I'm taking the work of Luigi and I'm adding these 2 dimensions to his model. Very, very limited contribution. And I think we would reject something that is only what I would call an incremental extension to knowledge. Third reason is weak theoretical grounding. This is where we have very weak literature, very poor positioning. Sometimes, with my experience, I can see where people have got mismatched papers together, added in information, and there's no real flow and there's no real theoretical grounding in the manuscript. And again, that's something that you can detect quite easily through a read through of a submission. Misalignment with editorial policies is kind of similar to strategic fit. But basically, I think Luigi mentioned, journals have evolving priorities. Currently, ours is around sustainability, it's around AI, it's around technology, for example. Sometimes we get submissions that are just outdated. Their work that this survey was conducted in 2012. Like, well, why are you submitting it in 2026? You know, you need to think about how current your work is. And so not only that it's aligning with current editorial policies, but how current is your work as well. Something which Luigi mentioned as well was methodology. I can't say it. Problems with your methodological design concerns. So where we have very small sample, very limited sample, we are currently at the Journal of Strategic Marketing only accepting papers that have primary research. And one of the reasons we're doing that is because we have so many submissions that we've had to make some decisions about desk rejection. And a desk rejection at the moment, it will change, maybe in July, but we're only accepting papers that have primary research in the manuscript. But just think about, you know, how valid and reliable is your methodology. And then finally, we have poor framing and positioning. This is the paper. This is the type of paper that I start to read and I just think, what are you talking about? I'm completely confused. It's words. It's just flowery words. And I might think, I have a feeling that it's AI generated. Obviously, I can't prove that. And part of the administrative process is to check for AI. But quite often, you know, poor positioning is just around a lot of words with no real focus that really, again, is quite easy to detect. So what I would say is, don't just randomly submit your paper to a journal because it's a 3 and your work's amazing. Think about the fit, really. And I think that is the common reason that we would desk reject a paper at the moment. And those priorities change over time. So the second thing I was asked, is how do you respond to reviewers' comments? Well, basically, as Luigi said, this takes time. It's not just a case of you reframing the paper, taking on board what the reviewers have said. It also involves you providing a response to the reviewers. So what you need to do is address every comment very clearly. Systematically list each comment. So I would suggest you have comments from reviewer 1. Systematically list each of those comments and respond to you've done it, you haven't done it, how you did it, and what you did. You need to directly respond to every single point, even if you think it's wrong, even if you maybe can't do it, it's not viable for you to carry that out. You need to systematically respond to every single comment. You need to be very transparent about the revisions. State what you've changed and where the changes were made. You don't need to highlight in your manuscript if you've provided a good, solid letter of response to the reviewer's comments. You don't need to make highlighted or anything, change your actual manuscript. What you need to do in the response to the reviewer is indicate, so reviewer 1.5, this has been changed on page 3 of the manuscript. As you can see, we have. I mean, it's kind of conversational, but you need to be very transparent about that. You also need to engage thoughtfully with the feedback. So what I mean here is don't say you're wrong. I don't think that's right. Show careful consideration. Bear in mind that a reviewer is not paid. They are doing this for citizenship reasons. They are doing this it's not part of their workload either. So just be very thoughtful about how you respond to the feedback and how you carefully consider their comments, even if you disagree with them. Always maintain a professional and respectful tone. It doesn't happen often, but sometimes we do get very, very disgruntled authors who send angry emails or angry responses. It gets nobody anywhere. It just causes lots of people upset, including people who send those comments back to reviewers who are then apologising and feeling very embarrassed that they did it in the heat of the moment. I don't know what that is. I have no clue what that was. Does anybody? Anyway.
So somebody's got their mic on and they're not aware.
I'll mute.
I think can somebody turn off their mic for them? I tried. I can't do it.
Yeah, I'll do it.
It was very nice music. Very nice music. Okay, so when you agree, I would opening where you agree with the reviewer's comments and you've been able to make changes. Briefly explain in the opening introduction how you've improved the manuscript. It's nice to thank the reviewers. You don't have to do that, but it is nice to thank the reviewers for their time and contribution. And sometimes there can be a glaring error that reviewers really help to improve the manuscript. So do explain how you've improved it and thank the reviewer for doing that. When you disagree, which is absolutely fine, you do not have to agree with reviewers, but when you do disagree, you need to make sure that you carefully consider how you're going to respond to that reviewer comment. So you're not required to follow every suggestion. You do not need to go and do a whole new survey, interview 50 people. You also have to remember that reviewers are human beings as well, and they may overlook something. I've got an example. Recently, a paper was sent for major revision, and the reviewer commented that having a survey of only 50 respondents was not adequate. And the author wrote back to me and said, the reviewer said we've only got 50 respondents. We've actually got 500 respondents, and the reviewer just made an error. These things do happen. So it could be something like that, or it could be something you just cannot respond to. It's not possible at all. What you need to do is just provide a clear and reasoned justification as to why you're not responding to it. As I said, you don't have to agree. It's how you respond that's important. Support your position with evidence. There could be a very sensible rationale for why you can't do that. I haven't got time. I've run out of budget. I really, they're not reasonable reasons to not follow a suggestion. So, they do need to be well justified and reasoned justifications. So engaging with the reviewers. So as I said, a strong response demonstrates engagement, clarity, and scholarly judgment, and not simple compliance. And what I mean by this is sometimes authors feel that they need to say, thank you very much for this. Thank you. We've done this. And they haven't. They are just providing a response to try and pacify and please the reviewer. So, it's really important that if you want your paper to proceed to the next stage of the review process, that you do engage with the reviewer's comments. We have had a number of those rejections that I listed. They were at stage 2, and they were usually because the the author has not responded adequately to the reviewer's comments, or not spent enough time doing that. So as Luigi said, it is a very long process, and sometimes it is very disheartening. The other thing I would suggest to any of you is, if you do get a desk rejection, and you do get a reject after 2 reviews, you can always engage with the editor. You can always, go back and have discussions and conversations, and maybe resubmit the paper to the journal at a later date. It doesn't close the door on that journal. So you can continue the dialogue, and a rejected paper can then be resubmitted as a new submission in the future. So I will end there and pass you back to Joshi. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Carolyn. Thank you. That was great. That was very, very helpful. Now we have Vojan, who will carry on from where Carolyn's left off. I think you're also going to talk a little bit about how you respond to revisions, but also maybe talk about some of your personal journey around this. Thank you very much. And of course, introduce your very important journal. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Carolyn. Thank you, Luigi and Joshi. Thank you. So if I'm going to tell a story about my journey, it starts actually being here with Luigi. I just realized I've known you for about 9 years, Luigi. You were my program director, and I met you my first day in Cardiff. It was in 2017 when I started my PhD. I'm from Palestine. I studied at Birzeit University في الضفة in the West Bank. I studied there. I did my undergraduate degree there in business. I did my MBA there, and I taught at Birzeit University for over 15 years. And when I started my PhD in 2017 at Cardiff with Luigi, and Luigi was also my first presentation at Cardiff. So this feels like I'm back in the classroom with Luigi doing a presentation for Luigi as well. So thank you all for inviting me to be here. There's a lot of nostalgia here, and it's very meaningful to me to be with my alma mater and Palestine at the same time. And to kind of move the conversation as well and pick up where, to build on Luigi's presentation and pick up where Carolyn left off in terms of reviewers and editors. I'll talk a little bit about my role at Gender, Work and Organization, because I just finished my PhD with Cardiff in 2023. So I'll just talk a little bit about this journal. Let me see if I can get this to move around. So Gender, Work and Organization is about 30 years old. And it's the first gender equality journal dedicated to gender relations. And they identify themselves as a multidisciplinary journal with a number of different issues that have to do with women in the workplace and equality issues, careers, and leadership positions. So in terms of the structure at GWO, I'll talk about a little bit about the hierarchy and the editorial board and how that works, and where my role fits in there. So we have our editors-in-chief, Bettina, Natalia, and Bronwyn. So it is also very international. When we talk about positionality, we have these women in different spaces running the journal. And then you have your associate editors, and we have our editorial review board. And where I am is on this emerging scholar review board. I always call it the rookie review board. And it's similar to what Luigi was talking about at JPIM. You were talking about a reviewer development program, and this is very similar to that. So I've been with them for about almost 2 years, maybe, if I'm not mistaken. And we also have a mentor, Banu Askanakpan from Brown University. So we kind of meet with the editors and Banu to talk about our role, learning how to be reviewers, what to look out for. So we'll have an editor kind of pass on an article to us to make the decision in terms of the desk rejection decision, or if we should move it forward in the review process. And for myself, similar to what Luigi was saying about not sending any article to a journal because it's your reputation if you don't really, make sure that you're sending something of quality. For myself as a rookie reviewer, I'm also very conscious of the fact that am I sending something of quality out to people to review? Because like Carolyn said, it's not something that they're getting paid for. It's their time and their effort. So that's a judgment call, and I do invest my time in making sure that if I am gonna, move it through the process, you have to also find the right people. You need to find experts who have the background. I don't have the background in everything. So you look for the key terms in finding the right people to review. So from my experience in doing that, and also in line with Carolyn, you were talking about reasons for desk rejection. I have done a couple of desk rejections. I hope it doesn't bite me back someday. And some of the reasons for desk rejection that we should be looking out for as researchers is sometimes, an author will try to make a big sweeping generalization and claim that they've done something that, is impactful on a broad scale when it apparently isn't. Or like Luigi said, you have a small number of participants and you're making these big claims based on a small number of participants. If you've done interviews, if you're not linking your work to theory, so you're claiming to frame your work in a particular theory, and it doesn't really match the work. The theory is telling the academic story and your work is telling the practical story. And if that doesn't fit together, that's another reason. And also, there are some authors who try to force themes that just really aren't there, to say that they have, conducted a piece of research, and, you can kind of see right through that. So those are reasons for desk rejections that I've done. Finding reviewers is very difficult because people don't have the time. I have a very scary story as a Palestinian. I have to tell you, it's a very scary story that I have with this paper that I'm working on right now. It's about Palestinian entrepreneurs. It's about sumud, which is resilience, a concept of resilience. So it's conceptualizing resilience in the Palestinian context. And we interviewed over 30 entrepreneurs, Palestinians in different places, within Palestine and abroad, to see how their entrepreneurship is a form of, carrying the narrative, trying to combat cultural erasure, to maintain our identity wherever we are. So that was originally sent to an FT50 4-star journal, and it did make it through. It went through, and we got first revision. And we also need to understand. We were talking about the reviewers, Carolyn, you were talking about listening to the reviewers and understanding how to engage with the reviewers, in addition to, there's a way that we conduct ourselves with the reviewers, and also, the content and the substance, but also understanding that there's an editor, right? So this paper was under review for about 5 months. We got a response after 5 months, and the editor really invested. We had 3 reviewers, very tough reviewers, and those 3 reviewers were speaking on very different ends of a spectrum. So what the editor did was, he said, I'm going to put together, he did the heavy lifting for us, and he said, this is meaningful and I want this to go through. And what he said was, I put this together I collated, what makes sense. I made sense of, what the reviewers had to say, and this is what you can work with. Here's the blueprint, and you respond to the reviewers accordingly, using myself and my feedback as your, point of reference. And perhaps we were a bit stubborn. I also take responsibility. I can't just lay the blame on the co-author. What we did was, instead of doing that, we responded to each reviewer to their own, and it was a very difficult task. And unfortunately, it was, had a lot of potential. It was rejected. Then, ironically, we submitted it to GWO, where I am now a rookie reviewer. They had it for a while and they rejected it. It didn't make it through even a first revision. And now it's with a 3rd journal, and it's in its 2nd revision. So the process isn't easy. It can deflate your ego in no time. You can think you have something that's got a lot of meaning. You can be proud of yourself, and then you have a good share of humble pie in the review process. So being on both sides of that coin, being the reviewer and engaging with reviewers is something really important. It's also tricky. I think particularly tricky trying to publish about Palestine, about occupation, about and trying to make your way through mainstream research on something that isn't quite mainstream, which is what brings me to the topic of interdisciplinary research, which can be an in for subjects like that aren't so straightforward. And there's a lot of different perspective in terms of what exactly we mean by interdisciplinary research. And to put these slides together, I like to look at different perspectives. I don't like to look at one source alone. So I did find this guide through the University of Edinburgh that talks about what exactly is interdisciplinary research and how to gain and how to benefit from it. So this perspective by Lyle in 2011 it defines interdisciplinary research as research that approaches an issue from a range of disciplinary perspectives. So we usually will say we have our identity in research. Let's say I do research in entrepreneurship, but when your research starts to go interdisciplinary, you're moving into different spaces, into different disciplines, and integrating that into your work. So there is mainstream entrepreneurship research. For instance, Carolyn, you were talking about making an incremental, contribution, or looking at other papers and saying you're building on other people's work. And that doesn't always work, right? So going interdisciplinary, but you really have to do it right. So that's one thing, different disciplines. And the contributions from the different disciplines are acknowledged and integrated into a holistic or systemic outcome. And it builds on knowledge foundations of academic disciplines. Interdisciplinary research can be, academic focused, or it can be based on, solving a specific problem. I think that when it's academic focused, it's sort of like when a field or a discipline has had its fill in trying to tackle a particular research question, and there isn't really an answer to it. You start looking at other disciplines, or if there's a specific problem that you want to tackle and you think that you need to tap into other disciplines. And to complement that perspective, I go back to Cardiff on their website talking about how we tackle challenges by bringing together interdisciplinary teams to collectively solve problems. And it sounds like it can be fun stuff, but you really have to kind of know what you're doing. You have to trust the people that you're working with. You should know their backgrounds if you don't know them personally. A lot of the networks we build, we don't know these people personally. We probably know their work. We can reach out to them and see how their work can add value to our own. I also get perspective from human relations. So we're talking about AI. So this is the lazy approach to getting a little bit of information about human relations. It's not a journal that I'm on a board for, but I've published in it. And the reason I do mention human relations is because it's also identified and ranked among social sciences interdisciplinary journals. And how they kind of refer to themselves as an interdisciplinary journal. They talk about integrating fields of organizational behavior, human resource management, psychology and sociology, political economy, ethics, entrepreneurship, critical management studies. So even critical management studies alone is embedded with a lot of different fields where you are, critiquing a particular field and bringing in other perspectives from other fields to do that. So, and then they say that these different kind of disciplines reflect the breadth and the depth of their readership and their authors. So they have an audience that's interested in interdisciplinary research, and they have authors that are, creating this research. So I just bring in an example of a paper that I published there, and I am still a rookie, so I can show off just a little bit here. And I think that this is also relevant, perhaps, to the topic that we're talking about in terms of interdisciplinary research. This is something that I published with my PhD supervisor in Cardiff, Shumaila Yousafzai. in 2024. It's called Navigating the Twisted Path of Gaslighting, a manifestation of epistemic injustice for Palestinian women entrepreneurs. And believe me, getting to the theory of epistemic injustice was several iterations. This was part of my PhD. I went through a lot of theories, I read a lot, and I could see several theories telling the story of these Palestinian women in an academic sphere. But I felt that epistemic injustice was probably the most fitting. Now, if we go back to what this has to do with interdisciplinary research, first is the topic of gaslighting, which is bringing sociology into the field of entrepreneurship, which really hasn't been done. So there's a novelty in that, and there is that integrating of a different discipline. You have Palestine. There is research on Palestine, not as much, and perhaps not as much in human relations, which brings the topic of occupation. And the tricky thing about occupation is because usually when you talk about occupation in research, it's defined more as job related and career related rather than an illegal occupation as Palestinians are living under. And that's probably one of the ways that actually got us to be able to publish about Palestine, referring to it as occupation, because there's a lot of politics involved with these journals that we need to be aware of. They're not going to explicitly say that we don't want to publish on this topic, but thankfully it was able. So you have to be diplomatic. It is kind of a game. You have to understand that there is a power balance or an imbalance, and there's some journals that are more willing to publish about Palestine and occupation than others. So you have Palestine, you have occupation, you have displacement in the participants. And when we're talking about women, there's gender, there's patriarchy. Of course, entrepreneurs is like the big picture there. I don't even focus on entrepreneurs. Then there's epistemic injustice, which is a theoretical perspective that framed this study. And when you bring in epistemic injustice, there you're bringing attention to patriarchy and occupation as the oppressive forces that these women are operating under as entrepreneurs. So there's it sounds like a lot of fancy footwork there. It does require a lot of focus, but when you really understand what you're doing. So also working with Shumaila, there's also something in doing this research in any study, this positionality and understanding where you stand or your position literally in relation to your participants. So I had that kind of insider perspective. I've lived in Palestine under occupation for 30 years after moving from the United States to Palestine. So I have that perspective. I know what it's like to live there, but also I can lose sight of things where you have Shumaila, who was an outsider kind of perspective, who had, the expertise in doing research, who was able to guide this process. So that sort of collaboration and being able to work with your supervisor in that capacity is something. To also try to highlight how the interdisciplinarity worked, I just kind of went through the paper and pulled out some of the headings throughout the paper, the keywords, the words in the title, those things that were making the paper go. And just starting off with the literature review of epistemic injustice in women's entrepreneurship. So those are two big fields there, because there's entrepreneurship, then there's women's entrepreneurship, and you have epistemic injustice. And then you have gaslighting, and talking about gaslighting with epistemic injustice. So that's another thing. Then bridging epistemic injustice with gaslighting through a post-colonial feminist lens. Because when we talk about feminism, there's not all feminism is created equal. There's Western feminism, which kind of still others women, and I need to be conscious of my words when we say global South, but anyone that isn't Western is othered in mainstream white feminism. So you have post-colonial feminism, which centers the narratives of women who are not white or Western, right? And focuses on the sources of oppression as well. So It's not saying that these women need to be saved or that they're uncivilized. No, they are under oppression, and we need to address those sources of oppression that usually kind of go without being held accountable. And then we defined gaslighting in the context of internally displaced women entrepreneurs. So there was a novelty in that and a reconceptualization of a concept from another field into entrepreneurship in the violent context in Palestine. And then there were implications for research and policies. So there was impact in that study. So we took a theory of gaslighting that's well referenced in the field of sociology. We took our participants' narratives, we contextualized it, we made this map of gaslighting as they encounter it, and we used rhetoric. So in doing the interviews, I was able to do the interviews in Arabic and transcribe them into English. But there were words that these women used very frequently in responding to the questions that we asked them. And we were able to kind of reframe in our findings and in our discussion kind of a new contextualized gaslighting framework in the Palestinian narrative. I thought it would be interesting and useful for anyone listening in terms of understanding, again, this was that reference from Edinburgh University, in understanding the opportunities that you have as early career researchers, and aiming for top tier journals and trying to understand, and as administrators, understanding that it shouldn't be just about the quantity of publishing, it's also about quality. And one way that we can get the Palestinian narrative into those journals is through leveraging interdisciplinary research collaborations. So it has its opportunities and it also has its challenges. It can be exciting that you're coming, with these different people from different specializations and feeling that you've come in with a breakthrough. But there's also the pitfall in that is you feel like you're kind of losing your identity. And again, if I say that I'm researching entrepreneurship and you're doing something in another discipline, it becomes increasingly difficult. At the moment, I am doing a working paper about the role of Google and Project Nimbus in what's happening in Palestine right now. And we're using secondary data, and it's like the disciplines are international business, which I don't really know much about international business, but what we're doing here with one of my colleagues here at Queen's University is I'm bringing in epistemic injustice to explain what's happening with different stakeholders, how Palestinians and how Google employees are enduring injustice through Project Nimbus there. So it can be tricky, but it can also be exciting. You just really need to know who you're working with and remember who you are as a researcher and what your strong suit is. You have something here is this increased career opportunities. If we look at that, but that can also, it's very niche, okay, which can be a good thing, but then it can make it more difficult for you to be competitive. The larger networks with more colleagues, more opportunities for collaboration, that's something, but then you need to look at the organization that you work for, what university, what research institute, and is that something that reflects the values of the organization that you're working with? That's another thing. So you need to understand yourself very well. You need to understand your organization very well. You need to understand the journals that you're targeting very well. So it's kind of like doing a SWOT analysis of yourself and the opportunities around you. And what your well-being is so incredibly important because it can get very difficult just by talking about the review process. As a reviewer, how difficult it is being a reviewer and having your paper under review and engaging with the reviewer. There's the politics and the diplomacy, and then there's the actual ability to do the things that they're asking you to do. You have to pick and choose your battles. When you don't want to change things, you need to really explain why and have a very strong grounding in that. And finally here, how do we navigate these challenges? Again, it's a matter of really understanding who you are as a researcher, what your strengths are, understanding that very well and leveraging that very well before you go into, a collaboration and doing interdisciplinary research. And also keeping your eye on, making sure that your outputs are of a certain quality that are going to, serve the purpose that you're doing research for, but also yourself and your organization. Is there any impact? So you might do something that's highly disciplinary and specialized, okay? Or you can do something that's interdisciplinary and exploratory, or that's going to make a policy impact. Also keeping track of your work with something called an ORCID ID. Also, I think looking for funding opportunities and special issues. You were talking about special issues that might be an opportunity for collaboration, interdisciplinary collaborations. Funding opportunities sometimes have mechanics within them that kind of have those opportunities wired into them, so to speak. Yeah, so that's me in my presentation, and thank you all very much. Thank you for listening, and thank you for your insights. And I'm going to stop sharing now. All right, thanks.
Thank you very much, Wajan. That was very helpful, insightful, and very impassioned. I'm sure that would have resonated with lots of people in the audience.
Thank you.
I don't know whether the panel has anything more to add. I think I'd like to open up to people's questions. I see one hand raised. Rani, you have a question?
Yes,
Then
thank you
Mohammed.
very much.
Okay.
I'd like to thank you all. Thank you for all the presenters for their valuable insights and for information shared about publication in top tier journals and disk rejections. This is, for me, it was an insightful workshop. My question is, we know that context is very important, and especially for us as a Palestinian researcher. So for all the presenters, what advice you could give us as researcher from context such as Palestine, where data collection is affected by instability, limited access, and institutional constraints? And does context itself, especially this question for Wajdan, represent a big issue for journal editors? Because I faced such a problem in a paper similar to your paper. It's a paper about mindset of Palestinian entrepreneurs after October the 7th, where it has been disk rejected maybe 15 times. And finally, we got an initial acceptance in the International Journal of Entrepreneurial Behavior and Research.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Congratulations. Who would like to tackle that? Mojan, would you like to tackle that?
I can
And
just
Luigi.
Yeah, just maybe a minute, or if Luigi, if you got something there. You always got something, Luigi. I could say context in terms of Palestine, and I've been asked to actually write more and explain further because, again, when you are an insider in the context, you don't understand how much more the nuances of things. We lose sight of how much background information we need to add. And I remember when I was a student in Cardiff, we had an exercise where we had to sit together and explain our research to each other. And I was kind of shocked at how many times I had to take a step back. And I remember saying Palestine, people didn't even know what, some people didn't never heard of it before. So explaining what that was, and then say, what do you mean occupation? And then tell that story. And then what do you mean displacement? And then they'll tell that story. So context is so important, and you it's good to perhaps, maybe a good idea and a good exercise is to send it to someone to have a read before you actually send it in to submit to a journal, and you'll have that eye kind of tell you before you send it and get it rejected, that, you know, there is something missing here, maybe someone outside of the context as well, not necessarily another Palestinian. It could be someone outside of the context altogether that can give you insight in terms of what you need to add in terms of context to explain the backstory about your research. And if it's been rejected, you know, you need to also ask yourself, you know, but I'm glad to hear that, you know, you've gotten an initial acceptance there. That's great news. And yeah, sometimes it is politics and it is very unfair. Sometimes it isn't, you know, so that's why I think it's a good idea to get someone else's opinion before you submit, even if it's you and your co-authors, you know, you still need another kind of perspective in there that might be very helpful. Yeah.
Thank you, Ojdan.
Very quickly, Rani, great question. Very good question. I'll say very briefly, context is a double-edged sword. Could be very useful, but could be also very tricky. So especially in top journals, they're not necessarily interested in the context itself, but how the context can lead to improve or enhance theory in a meaningful way. Then they listen. So if you just bring the context by saying, oh look, my context is important, and it is important, it will not fly. That can explain the desk rejection. When you show how context provides a contribution to theory and you link to the debate, then they listen. And there are two ways in which context can do this. Theory is about explaining relations between phenomena, right? In a sentence. So a context can show a new phenomenon, something that is unique to your place. And you say, my contribution to theory is to show that this phenomenon exists and we need to understand it. The second way is context can show a situation in which what we think we knew doesn't work. And so you may say, well, we know that in a Western context or in a peaceful context, things used to work this way. But when you change the context, the laws we think they were working do not apply anymore. So we need to understand new theory, new relations. So always frame it in terms of how does the context illuminate the theory? And I think you will get further down the line than just saying, I've tested this in my context and found these results. But great question.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can we have the next person I see up it's Firas. Do you have a question, Firas?
Yes. First of all, thank you for all the presenters for this insightful workshop. So my question is for Prof. Caroline. You talked about common reasons for desk rejection, and my question is about the fourth point, which is talked about misalignment with editorial priorities. So in this way, my question is, how can researchers better identify and align their manuscripts with the evolving editorial priorities of a target journal before submission?
So I think that's around knowing the journal that you're targeting. You know, you read their papers, you perhaps review for the journal as well, and you have that knowledge. Also, we do sessions similar to this where we discuss changes and forthcoming trends. One thing that you could do is to email the editor and say, I quite often, and I'm sure Luigi and you both, we quite often get, I'm thinking of submitting this paper to the journal. Does it align? Is it working? But so you could do that to save time. But I think basically it's about knowing the journal, you know, being part of that journal community, reading the papers that are coming through. One thing that's quite indicative is if you go to a journal webpage, you'll see the list of current special issues. And that will give you some indication as to the changes. So currently we've got an AI special issue. As I mentioned, we've got a luxury fashion one, and you can kind of see the way things are evolving. And I have to say, as an editor, it's not planned. I don't decide this is what we're going to do. It just happens from the submissions and the popularity of some of the papers that we have. But if you're ever in doubt, just drop a short email to the editor, to an editor, and ask them.
So is reading recent published articles enough to understand editorial alignment?
Well, no, not just recently published, because partly because it takes a while for a paper to get to submission. But I think it's, as I said, for us, one of the indications would be the special issues. I've just noticed Luigi's commented on this in the chat. Shall we, Luigi, did you want to say something?
Yes.
Yeah, I was no, sorry, I didn't want to overlap.
No, not at all.
There was a question in the chat, so I was replying to that.
Oh, sorry. Okay, I couldn't read it all. Sorry. But as I said, familiarity with the journal is important.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very so much.
Thank you, Firas. Thank you, Carolyn. Bilal, I've got Bilal there next. I think you.
Yes. Hi, everybody. Thank you for this seminar. But I have just 2-3 points to raise as a FD candidate regarding, for example, Mr. Logi, regarding ecological value. So I have a question regarding that. We are not fresh graduate. We have good experience in some fields, in banking, telecommunication, or somewhere else. So how we can embed the practical experience into our research article, and usually we get revision from the peer review. They are telling we need supporting evidence to theoretical basis, and we know that sometimes there is difference between theoretical basis and the practical implication. Second, to Caroline. Dr. Caroline, regarding the respond to comments coming from reviewers, always we receive that we need to reply to them politely, and almost of the time we agree in their comments. Why? Because that's the relationship between Saward and the Nick. We need to publish for some reason. If we got matured, sure, we will not reply to them. But sometimes, by force, we need to agree to get the article published. The second thing is regarding the rejection is the word count. Actually, I have experience in that regarding word counts. So I feel like that's if from the first submission or from the journal restriction to add, like, for example, 7,000 words or 7,500 words. So if I am from the start deduct the words and reduce the number of words up to minimum level, that will be maybe give impression for this contribution to the theoretical contribution or to the paper overall. So why from editorial first accept it and revert to the peer reviewed, and later on will be customized? The last, I'm so sorry for delay, for your respective regarding the editor role. There is the editor role intervention. For example, if he from the desk and from his side accepted the document and forwarded for reviewers and got rejected, how he can intervention for this matter? For example, if he feel that the paper should be take a path and while peer reviewed already rejected. Thank you.
Thank you. Carolyn, do you want to respond to that?
Okay, so the first point you made, I think, was you feel that you have to respond positively to reviewers. Sometimes it's not possible to respond to a reviewer, so they could be asking you to do additional research, additional primary research that you just haven't got the time, the facilities, and you just need to explain that. And it's not about agreeing with reviewers, it's about engaging with reviewers. acknowledging that the point might be relevant, or even saying, actually, imagine if it was a conversation with someone at a conference. So you present your work at a conference and somebody questions you, you have a conversation with the person in the audience that it could be that they're wrong or they misinterpreted. And that's exactly the same with the reviewers. And I think it's the engagement with the reviewers, not being salient and just agreeing with the reviewers. And if you don't do the things that a reviewer wants, you shouldn't be agreeing with them, if that makes sense. So I disagree that you have to respond positively to reviewers. It's how you engage with the reviewers and their comments and how you present your resubmitted paper. The word count is a total I'm trying to think of a word that's it's problematic for everybody. The publisher sets the word count. We have no input into the word count. I recently, after about 2.5 years, maybe more, got the word count for Journal of Strategic Marketing up from 6,000 words to 8,000 words. Now, we cannot control it. Your paper will be rejected by an administrator if it's over the word count. It's just a tick box exercise. They don't even send the paper to us. It's automatically sent back to you. I do have authors emailing me saying, this is the reason why my paper is now 12,000 words. I won't even see it if it doesn't conform to the word count. It's completely out. I don't know if it's the same for others, but with Taylor and Francis, it's completely out of our control. We've lobbied. There are reasons for that, and it is about equity, because if we allow, it's a bit like our students, isn't it? If we allowed one student to submit 12,000 when the word limit's 8,000, it's not equitable. But as you know, it really is something that's been problematic for a very long time when a resubmitted paper is over the word limit. And as I said, it doesn't even get to the editor's file because it doesn't conform to the instructions for authors. And I think your third question was about intervention. Were you asking, just to clarify, if your paper was desk rejected and you disagreed with the desk rejection, can you go back and appeal to the editor? Is that what you were asking?
Sorry, no. If it's from editor already accepted and refer it to the reviewers, right? Peer reviewer. So if the peer reviewer get a major revision or rejected, so there is intervention from editor role.
Oh yes, sorry. So what happened? The process is, if I'm understanding your question, the process is the associate editor will send out the paper to a number of reviewers, and they have to have 2 online peer reviews for it to be processed any further. Again, the publisher will not let a paper proceed if it's not got 2 online reviews. Then the associate editor will read the reviews and make a recommendation. They can make the recommendation, it comes to my files. I then look at the paperwork, the reviews, and the associate editor's recommendation, and then it goes to final decision. So it's not one person making that decision. And to be honest, most of the time it's quite clear. I very rarely have discrepancies and disagreements with associate editors over their recommendation. What we would do, however, is if a paper, one reviewer said absolutely, definitely reject, and one reviewer said accept with minor revisions, we'd send it to a third reviewer to try and get a third perspective. But generally, we don't really encounter I don't really encounter that huge discrepancy. You know, it could be major revision, minor revision, and then I'll make the call on which it is. But yeah, if needed, we would send a paper to a third reviewer as well. Sorry, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. Fair.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks very much, Caroline. Thanks, Caroline. Mohammed, would you like to ask a question to any of the panelists?
Thank you, and thank you everyone for this important initiative. I appreciate giving us insights into this kind of important topic. I want to make a comment, and all the panel members are welcome to address my comment, but I'm particularly interested in Wijdan's view, because She is a Palestinian academic who worked in a Palestinian university and a UK university. I share something similar. I taught both in An-Najah and in the UK. I got my master's and PhD from the UK, and I have recently published in the accounting firm, which is ABS 3-star journal. My comment is that there is a deep cultural and institutional differences between not only Palestine, the Middle East in general, and the UK educational system. I appreciate this kind of initiatives, but I doubt that it might be translated into actual improvement in our side, and I will explain why I don't want to be harsh in my comment. For example, most universities in the Middle East, we talk about the academic evaluation and promotion, they use the impact factor as a key for evaluation, which is not the case in the UK in general. Since day one, they told us, don't care about impact factor. We have the ABS ranking system, we have the ABDC, and so on and so forth. So that was our anchor, our benchmark. For example, in Palestine, you rarely see, there are a handful of academics who manage to publish in ABS 3-star. They're even like, you can advance easily to a professor or assistant professor without even have the need to publish an ABS 3-star journal. Not only this, even rewards and promotions, for example, you can sometimes get higher financial reward if you publish in impact factor, like different categories. We have, for example, above 9 or above 5, so on and so forth. For example, I will give a very specific example. The Accounting Organization Society Journal, which is one of the Financial Times top 50 list, and it's one of its 4-star ABS ranked, and it's one of the elite journals in accounting, one of the top. It's only impact factor 4. If you publish in it, you will be considered less achieved. Your achievement will be perceived as less important than if you, for example, I published in a humble journal, Corporate Social Responsibility and Environmental Management, which is ABS 1-star, but it's 9 impact factor. That was, it's a big achievement. But if you publish in a very elite journal, so this kills the motivation, because as you know, we have in management accounting, we have a saying that you get what you measure. If you focus on impact factor, this will be the driving anchor. And this is bad because impact factor does not distinguish between predatory journal or not. And there are studies, many studies, that most publications in predatory journals come from less developed countries, universities from less developed countries. They don't have that kind of background that the UK has to drive the academic, the academics into targeting like high quality journals. And even if they target, many academics have recently started to target like top journals, but the chances are very slim because they don't understand that kind of culture. And towards them, especially because, as I said, because being part of the two institutional systems, you can reflect on this. How can this kind of initiatives improve, given that all what I have said, especially about the academic evaluation and promotion system that we have in Palestine and the culture in Palestine? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bhushan, would you like to? I think that was directed at you. So if you would like to respond to that.
There was a lot of twists and turns in that question, but what I understood, and if I'm mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong, are you talking about an initiative like this and what impact it can have in Palestine? Is that what you're asking, Muhammad?
Yeah, in general, because we arrange like a number of initiatives, especially from academics from the UK. But at the end, we have a different institutional system that does not align with what you are saying. This is the core issue.
Thank you. Okay, Muhammad. So there's one side of what I can say is that it goes back to your values, your priorities, and what access you have. And then another thing in terms of you are getting insights from the people who have access to things, who have knowledge and experience with these outlets that are telling you how you can actually publish. So just because you're in Palestine doesn't mean that you can't actually publish. And that can, if it doesn't align with your organization's priorities, and it's difficult to navigate that, and then from an institutional perspective, there's opportunities for you perhaps elsewhere, or things that you can do to either help your cause or help yourself. So I don't think that it's something that's not useful or not helpful. I think quite the contrary. I think that just hearing stories and hearing experiences and getting, that kind of insight from people who are, we're very different contexts, right? And very different, systems. But at the same time, when you understand what you need to do to get where you want to get, it doesn't necessarily have to be in your institution. Maybe there's other institutions in Palestine that will acknowledge that kind of accomplishment.
Can I intervene? I think the impact factor thing is not based on it's not limited to a Najah case. It's the entire Middle East, and there are studies about this kind of thing. And you can double check after this meeting. You can go and search for the academics in Palestine or the universities. You will barely have any academics that has published in ABS 3-star and above. And this is the issue. They can, most publications, and you can check by yourself, ABS 1, ABS 2, or not even indexed in ABS, and sometimes in predatory journals. It's not to undermine this initiative. I really appreciate it, but this is something that it frustrates me that we try to deliver a message. I always fight for this case. Why we don't look for the ABS ranking? Why we don't look for the ABDC ranking? Why we don't understand the other side? And the impact factor is the anchor, and this is the issue. So my comment was not to undermine the efforts. I really appreciate this, and I think that it's enlightening to listen to this kind of insights from editors of high top-tier journals. But it's just to acknowledge reality, which is we have deep institutional barrier to materialize in these rich insights. This does not undermine the insights themselves, but to acknowledge that there is limitations that undermine the capitalizing on what you're saying. And this is just to correct to make sure that we're on the same page. Thank you, Stan.
Can I?
Yes, Luigi, please.
Briefly, to help out with an additional comment. I think I agree with your point, Mohammed, and I've experienced a similar situation, where coming from Italy, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, research wasn't really evaluated within an international standard. Similar to what you said, the incentives were different. People could go through the entire career without even writing a word in English and knowing the journals. But that changed. Within 20 years, now the situation is a lot different, and the country has caught up. So I think this can happen in your context and in other similar contexts. So my answer to your dilemma would be, in the short term, you have to play by the incentives, by the system you have, because if that's the only way to get a job, get a promotion, and secure your position. However, that doesn't prevent you also to look beyond that and try to publish with the international standards. So you may get go for impact factor because you have to, but also go for the quality because you want to and you're looking forward. And then when the system catches up with the rest of the world or a different reality, you will have an advantage. So I understand the dilemma, but the problem don't make the problem your own problem. Just play with it and don't think that one thing prevents the other. I know it's difficult when you see people with publication in predatory journals getting promoted easily, but if you think that's not an ethical thing, it's not a justification for you to follow it. But things change and things catch up with a better model.
Can I add one last thing? I'm very sorry for taking so much time in my intervention. Just one last thing. You know what's the most frustrating thing is that when we try to do something like when we target like a highly ranked journal, for example, my paper at the academic forum took like 1.5 years, which is not usual here. 1.5 years to publish. I could have published 2 to 3 papers in like impact factor list quality journals and get the higher evaluation. But because of what I totally agree with you, and that was an amazing insight. And the analogy between, which is not entirely analogy between Italy and Palestine, it's a good thing because that you have to play with what you have, with what you get. And I try as much as possible to convey the message that we have to improve. But this is the issue. It's not easy for academics, especially coming from different backgrounds. You have to survive, giving the standards here in Palestine. And if you want to publish in good journals, you have to put much effort. You have considerable effort. You could have done much more financially if you went for the other path. But I chose the difficult path, and I managed to publish in 1-star, 3-star, and 2-star. And I am reviewing for 3-star journals currently. I have reviewed 1-star, another 3-star. So I'm in that stage. I know it's not worthwhile right now, but I hope to benefit my society by conveying that what these kind of experiences mean for them as academics. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mohammed. That's a very, very useful for us to know what you are all facing and dealing with and all the different difficulties. I mean, we are completely ignorant or unaware of it. Maybe Vojan is, but I speak for myself, of course. And it's useful to know, and we hope that we can, help in some little way if possible. Are there any other questions for the panelists? I know we are almost towards the end and everyone must be fading fast after 2 hours session, but are there any questions or remarks or anything of that? Okay. Thank you very much. And Rafa, maybe you'd like to just close with some observations or.
Yeah. First of all, I would like to thank you very much on behalf of Faculty of Business and Communication. I would like to express my sincere appreciation to our distinguished speakers that we have today. Professor Caroline Strong, Professor Luigi De Luca, and Dr. Wazdan Umran for their valuable insight and thoughtful guidance and generous sharing of experience. And in fact, they shared a lot of ideas, insight that will make difference for our researchers, young researchers, our faculty members. And also, I would like to extend our thanks to Cardiff Business School at Cardiff University for this meaningful collaboration, which reflect the importance of building bridges between our institutions and advancing research excellence through international academic engagement. And I would like to thank also our guests or our participants who were with us today. Finally, I think this will be the first of a series of lectures that aim to improve the, let's say, publication culture at our university and improve the collaboration in research between our business schools.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I completely concur. That is the part, the direction of travel, and we look forward to many more meaningful engagements in this kind of forum or maybe even more direct forum. We hope that in the future travel will be much easier and there'll be opportunities for us to organize workshops in person, but also online, given the logistics. And finally, I'd really like you, Rafat. I really appreciate your audience, your graciousness, and really, it was a real learning experience, at least from my part. And I'm sure that will be the case for the panelists. And really, thanks to my colleagues for taking the time to talk to everyone. We look forward to hearing more about your progress and so on. Again.
Inshallah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Yes. Please
have
be
a nice evening.
mindful of the opportunities of special issues and all of that was presented. Please make use of that opportunity.
Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Good night.